Good evening from the tragic scene in Childers. 15 young travellers are now confirmed dead in the fire at the backpackers' hostel. 3 more are still missing. Most of the victims were British, but 3 are Australians. From the survivors, there are tales of heroism.
Perth's exclusive backpackers was anything but. A woman dead and another in a serious condition in hospital after fire tore through the city hostel.
Hey everyone. The Childers Backpackers fire happened in the year 2000, and it had a profound effect on me as a hostel owner. It was one of the events that prompted me to upgrade the sprinkler system in my hostel to the highest life safety standard. Now you may say that the year 2000 was a long time ago, and frankly, nobody uses VHS tapes anymore. Unfortunately, the second clip I showed happened in 2019, so this is definitely still something that hostel owners should continually think about. In this video, I want to talk about some of the ways that you can make your hostel safer when it comes to fire. Now, of course, no hostel owner wants to have a fire in their building. Aside from the emotional toll of having hostel guests get injured or die in your hostel, a fire with a loss of life will very likely bankrupt and shut down your business. But you say, I have insurance to cover me in this situation. Well, I sure hope you do, but have you checked the limits of your coverage on your insurance policy? Most commercial insurance policies top out at about $2 million in coverage, but each wrongful death claim can easily total more than $1 million. Now, it's really awful to think about this, but at least the legal system in the U.S. bases the value of human life on things like the future earnings that the deceased would have provided to their family. In other words, the younger your deceased guest is, the more a wrongful death lawsuit could potentially cost you because they would have had more years to be gainfully employed. Not only that, if it can be shown that you were negligent in maintaining the life safety systems in your hostel, you can be criminally charged in some countries. In the United States, this is called depraved heart murder or indifference to human life. It's a type of murder where an individual acts with depraved indifference to human life, such that acts result in death despite the individual not explicitly intending to kill. So as you can see, this is serious stuff. Even though hostels are a fun way to make money, and in some cases a lot of money, and that will only make things more difficult for you in the event of a lawsuit, you always want to be able to show and prove that you proactively maintain the life safety systems in your hostel. We'll talk about that more later in this video. So let's start with the smoke detector. I know life safety standards vary throughout the world, but if you don't have this simple, cheap device throughout your hostel, you should be very afraid. In countries with developed fire and life safety regulations, smoke detectors will be tied to a central alarm panel, and you'll be required to have this panel maintained and routinely inspected by an outside company. But even if you don't have this requirement where your hostel is located, you should at least install individual smoke detectors throughout your hostel and in each of your sleeping rooms. Inspect them and maintain them. Don't trust that somebody will wake up and shout fire. In many cases, a slow-growing fire will fill the room with smoke and CO2, and your guests will be rendered unconscious and unable to wake up to shout fire. Seriously, I don't care if your hostel is located in the poorest country in the world. If you're running a hostel business, you're assuming some responsibilities for the life safety of your guests. Get some smoke detectors, and if you can't find affordable ones in your country, let me know and I will order some $5 ones from Amazon.com and I'll send them to you. So sprinkler systems, I mentioned them before, but if you can afford it, or if it's required where your hostel is located, get the best fire sprinkler system that you can. This is the absolute best way to reduce the possibility of a fire-related death in your hostel. As I mentioned, I opted to upgrade my hostel sprinkler system to NFPA 13 standards. Now, in the US, the National Fire Protection Agency publishes these standards, and the highest level is called NFPA 13, which means that the building is protected and considered fully sprinklered to provide both life safety, protection to the facility, and its contents. This means that there is fire sprinkler coverage through the entire building, including the unoccupied spaces such as attics and closets. Previously, my hostel was only partially sprinklered to provide life safety and a moderate level of building protection. This was called NFPA 13R, which only provided protection so that the occupants could escape in the event of a fire. It was basically just in the stairway. Either way, given how many people we host in our hostels, I'm a huge proponent of fire sprinklers for hostels. But sometimes emergency egress is just as important, if not more important. After watching this video, I would like to suggest that you visit each room of your hostel and imagine yourself trapped in that room by smoke or fire at the main door. Look out the window. Can you get out there? I remember reports in the Childers backpacker fire that said that some of the windows had security bars that prevented guests from escaping the fire. So how tall is your hostel? Is there a fire escape? If so, you should routinely inspect the fire escape and make sure that it's secured to the building. It sits there day after day, just exposed to the weather, and the last thing that you want in the event of a fire is to get a bunch of weight on it. You want to make sure it's not rusted and the extension ladder will easily extend to the ground and you know how to operate it. In some cities like San Francisco, building owners are required to have their fire escapes professionally inspected once a year and get a certificate. However, this is not strictly enforced, so it's really up to the building owners to stay on top of this requirement. You can bet that if there's ever a fire in your hostel, the authorities will soon arrive on the scene and they will make sure that these requirements were fulfilled, and they will point fingers at you if you failed to do something. By now you can likely tell that it's not enough to just merely hope that your hostel's life safety systems will perform in the event of an emergency. You will need to be able to prove that you are knowledgeable about these systems and you have thought about life safety and maintained these systems over the years. So how do you do this? Well, first, you should make a written inventory of all of the life safety measures that you have in your hostel. What's required in your life safety inventory will depend on the size of your hostel and more likely the regulations that are applicable to the city or town where your hostel is located. Don't rely on somebody from the city to come knocking on your door and tell you what these requirements are. Do your research, ask questions of city officials, and be aware of the life safety systems in other hostels. Ask other hostel owners questions about the choices that they've made for their life safety inventory. By the way, if you're nervous about asking questions of city officials about your hostel, I've included some tips on how to do this carefully in the Hostel Professionals Library. I'll put a link to this down below in the description. Here are some of the things that I've always included in the life safety inventory at my hostel. Sprinkler system, check. Fire alarm system, check. Smoke detectors.
Stink smoke.
Fire extinguishers. You want to make sure that they're actually charged, they haven't been tampered with, they're up to date. Smoke seals on doors. This is often overlooked because in a fire, it's often not the fire that actually kills people. It's they become overcome with smoke, they're not able to find the exits, and they just can't find their way out of the building. So smoke seals on the doors prevent the smoke in one area from extending throughout the entire hostel. Fire escapes, emergency lighting so people can actually find their way out of the hostel, fire blanket in the kitchen, some other measures for preventing fire in the kitchen, and emergency egress signage. Remember, your guests don't know the building as well as you do, so you'll want to have some signage so that they can actually see how to do it. Now, it's true that not every guest reads these signs. You've probably seen these in hotel rooms and you don't read it. But in a hostel, you hope that some of those do-gooders, some of those geeks, actually took time to read it, and they will be able to shout out instructions and help others in the event of a fire. So that's why you want to have the signs. There may have been some other items that I forgot about on this list, but you get the idea. Next, you want to create an inspection form that will remind you or your manager about each item and its location, and then decide how often you want to inspect these items. The more often you inspect them, the more easily you'll be able to show that you took fire safety seriously when the fire inspectors, insurance companies, and others begin pointing fingers at you. However, in my opinion, if you make the inspection due too often, you won't be able to keep it up, or your manager won't take it seriously. The last thing that you want to do is have your manager just check all the boxes and be like, yeah, it's all good, fine. For me, a monthly inspection feels about right. By the way, these inspections are your job, or you can delegate it to your manager. But I would personally not delegate this to your housekeepers or your front desk staff. You want someone who will really understand the gravity and the importance of these inspections. That said, it's totally okay if you want you or your manager to bring along a helper for the inspection. In fact, it's quite helpful when it comes to smoke detectors that are located up on the ceiling. I've always done these inspections on a paper form. I'm not a fan of online forms for these inspections. I feel like that there are small differences in the handwriting and the notes in the margins that increase the authenticity of the form. You really can't tell what the intent or the nuance of someone when they actually just click a box on an online form. So I prefer the paper form for that. Now, if you get something that fails in your inspection, do not simply write on the inspection form and call it done. In these cases, the inspection cannot be completed at this time, and you'll need to postpone the finalization of the inspection and deal with that issue immediately in the next day or so. Then you can continue the inspection and write down what you did to correct the deficiency in the margin. Now, why do I do this? Well, I've seen instances where the inspections are getting done on a monthly basis and the failed inspection item is dutifully documented month after month and the problem is never fixed. The last thing that you want after a fire is to have documentation that provides evidence that you knew there was a problem and you did nothing about it. Remember, you want these inspection forms to help you, not hurt you. Finally, after you or your manager has done the inspection, take a picture of it or scan it. Get a copy of the inspection off-site. You do not want to file your paper inspection form in a filing cabinet at the hostel because after a fire, you don't want to have all of the evidence of your properly maintained life safety systems in ashes. So would you like to see more about fire and life safety in future videos? I have a lot to say on this topic. Choosing the right smoke detectors, a device that actually makes your stove turn off when the smoke detectors go off, fireproof paints, fire pre-planning with your staff, a lot more. So let me know what you want to learn next. I know this was a grim topic, but it's super, super important, so I really appreciate you watching to the end, and I'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.